Larry Miller is a troubleshooter. His clients are companies across the country. His challenge? Help them compete successfully in the changing global economy. Larry Miller is president of his own consulting firm, L.M. Miller & Company of Atlanta, Georgia.
There is a revolution going on within the American corporate culture, and it's a revolution based on the reality that we are now entering a global world economy. And that global competition is causing us, it's like a team playing on a new playing field or a new league. We've got to compete on a global scale, and that competition is forcing a change within the American corporate culture. We are all both managers and leaders. And you know, the manager is like the steerer of the car, the person sitting at the wheel, turning it left, turning it right, shifting gears, controlling and directing the energy. But do you know that you can sit in that car all day long and get real worn out and go nowhere if there's no fuel in the tank, fire in the engine? Leaders create energy, create human energy, and they do it by having a positive vision of the future. You are a leader as well as a manager, and your job as a leader of the people whom you lead is to have a positive vision of the future of that group of people. That vision can divide into two categories. One, a vision of the business, what our future products, markets, etc. will be, but also a vision of what that mini society will be, what that group of people will be like next year, the year after, etc. If you have that positive vision and you share it with the people below you, that creates positive energy moving towards that vision. Creating that is part of your job. We want a vision of tomorrow's culture. What is the culture? The culture is the sum of our habits. If you just think about the way people in Brooklyn or Alabama or Tokyo or Hong Kong behave, not with planning and intention, but habitually, automatically, the way they speak, when I go into my office in the morning, I automatically get a cup of coffee. You can trust me. I don't need to see it on a to-do list. I don't need anybody managing me for that. It's an efficient process, having the habits. And if we create within our people the culture, those habits that lead to high productivity and high quality, we will create managerial efficiency. It's easier to manage people when they have the habits than when you're trying to manage them in a way that's contrary to those habits. So let's examine our culture and let's try to create a culture. Let's try to create those habitual behaviors that automatically lead one to behave in ways that lead to high productivity. Now, one of the changes that's going on in the culture is we're moving from an assumption, and it's an assumption that worked in the past that was an assumption of control. The manager's job was to define the work and control employees to behave according to his or her prescription. That assumption is dying. Now we want a culture of commitment. We want a culture of commitment because the culture, the performance of the future to which we must manage is performance of discretionary effort. In other words, when I am at home Saturday afternoon mowing my lawn, I may choose to think about the problem. And choosing to think about the problem, I come up with a new idea, a new solution about how to do things better at work. That's discretionary effort. It's effort based on my values, based on my assumptions, and that's commitment. We want to create that commitment. You need to have a vision of tomorrow's culture for your group of people. I'd like to help you create that vision of tomorrow's culture. I have 8 principles here, and I'd like to go over them and share them with you. And they're my vision of tomorrow's culture. I'm not asking you to buy all these ideas. I just hope in going through them, I will stimulate you to think about what is your ideal vision. And I'd like you to talk with your team, with the people who report to you, the people you work with. I'd like to get a dialogue going there about what we want the future society that makes up this group of people to be like, creating that vision. Now, the first principle I call purpose. Now, we hear a lot of new ideas in management today, and this idea of purpose, perhaps it's so ancient, it's so old, that it might appear new, but it's not new. It's a very old thing. Leaders throughout all generations have understood the concept of purpose. Now, you may be the perfect manager. You may know exactly how to set objectives, give database feedback, design compensation plans, etc., etc. All those are good things to do, and all of them create performance. But you know, you might do all those things 100% well, and you'll get 100% of the performance available for managerial technique. But I've got news for you. There's a whole nother realm of performance, a whole nother 100% that I will call the realm of sacrifice. People will die for a noble cause. They will sacrifice. They will give of themselves. Why? Because they understand the mystery of sacrifice. What is the mystery of sacrifice? It is that when one sacrifices to that which one believes to be noble or worthy, there is no sacrifice. There's only an investment with a guaranteed return. Return in what? Return in that which is most important to us. Return in self-esteem. Return in how we feel about ourselves. The job of the leader is to create purpose, to create a sense of mission. What is it worthy that we are doing here? What is it noble that we are doing here that will create energy amongst these people? Well, we can find that purpose, we can find that energy if we know who our customer is. We all serve a customer, and we create energy when we are in communication with that customer. That customer may be within the organization, maybe the next department that receives the paper, the information that you're working on. Or it may be the internal customer the external customer rather, who uses the telephone. Indirectly or directly, we all have both internal and external customers. I think that every employee in the organization has a right to know their customer and to feel that they are serving that customer. It's your job as a manager or leader to help them understand that customer, listen to that customer, communicate with that customer, be in contact with them so they can feel that sense of self-esteem that comes from knowing you're doing a good job for that customer. That creates a sense of purpose. Now, principle number 2, I call the consensus principle. Whether we like it or not, all management worldwide is moving from a culture of command on one hand to the end of another continuum, a culture of consensus. We don't want to be at one end of that continuum or the other. And in fact, there's still a time when command is appropriate. If the building starts to burn down and we smell smoke, is the right thing to do form small problem-solving groups, get out flip charts and brainstorm all the ways we might get out? Well, I don't think so. I'd rather that the person who knows where the exits are stand up, take charge, and in a loud, commanding voice, line us up and march us out at double time. He or she will be doing us a service. In times of crisis, we want conformity, not creativity. Conformity is produced by command. So in crisis, we want command. It's why it's always been the dominant style of decision-making in the military. But the reality of the world that we work in today is not a reality of constant crisis. On the contrary, it should be planned, deliberate. Today, what will produce high performance in our organization is a culture of creativity. Is a culture where every employee in the organization is involved in making decisions, involved in the process of management, figuring out what is good performance, figuring out what we can do about that good performance. And that process of involvement produces creativity, produces high performance. The job of the manager today and tomorrow is not so much to make the best decisions, him or herself, but it is to create a process that results in collective wisdom. Even the President of the United States, as powerful as he may be, is not powerful enough to singly, alone, and lowly command all the right decisions. Can he have his own terrorist policy totally independent of what the leaders of Germany or Israel or the United Kingdom do? No. He, even the President of the United States, must manage and must make decisions in consensus. We live in an interdependent world. Your department, your organization is interdependent within other departments, and the people below you are in an interdependent world. It's your job to help create collective wisdom. And to create that collective wisdom, we do not just want a group of people who act alike, think alike, dress alike, have the same background and experience. In other words, a group of clones. You know, it's very easy to get consensus from a group of people who are clones. In fact, you don't even have to get them together. You can just ask one, and you'll have a consensus. But it won't be very creative, will it? It will not be very rich. What we want tomorrow is to manage a group of people who have diverse ideas, diverse opinions. And from the clash of those differing opinions comes the spark of truth. It's the job of the manager to be the orchestrator, to be the conductor of the orchestra, bringing these clashes of differing opinions together into a harmonious whole, a unified consensus decision. That's where we want to move to. Your job as the manager of a team is to involve all those people in that process of forming consensus, which results in commitment. Another principle that will result in high performance in tomorrow's culture is what we call excellence. Now, we've all heard a lot about excellence over the last few years. There was, of course, the book on excellence, and we've probably talked about that a lot. I'd like to share with you just one thought about what produces excellence in an organization. And it's the same thing that produces excellence within an individual. Now, you might think that if one were really excellent, whether an excellent manager or housewife or scientist or teacher, that if one were truly excellent, one would feel very satisfied. Well, there's an irony. I have never met an excellent manager who was satisfied. In fact, if you look at people who achieve excellence, one of the things you find is that people who achieve excellence have some mechanism within them where they're always moving the target up, and they're never satisfied. There is a creative dissatisfaction within them. And that creative dissatisfaction is the awareness of the gap between who I am and who I could be and where I could be. And there's always a gap. No matter how good we are, we could all be better. People who achieve excellence have a conscious awareness, an excitement about closing that gap. As a manager leading a group of people towards excellence, your job is to help your group of people understand that gap. To understand that, they've got to understand the reality, the truth about where they are, performance today. They also have to understand who they could be and where they could be in the future. They've got to have that vision. That gap creates excitement. That's an element of excellence. My fourth principle is what I call the unity principle. Now, throughout all of human history, there have been different classes in society. And undoubtedly, in the past, that was right. It served a function. If you think about it, you know, there were the clergy, the rabbis, or the priests who dedicated themselves their entire life to memorizing the oral tradition. There wasn't printing. There wasn't the written word. And it was right that there was a class apart dedicated to that. In the military, there were the captains, the officers, who were, in fact, very knowledgeable compared to the workers, if you will, the gunmen down on the lower gun decks in the ship of war. There was a genuine gap, and it went along with the process of decision-making that was a command process. The world is changing, however. Today, we want every worker to be involved in the process of managing. We want every worker to feel responsible, to be thinking, not just doing. In the past, there were thinkers and doers. Management, labor, priests and laymen, officers and seamen, non-exempt and exempt, salaried and hourly. We have preserved within the organization these class distinctions. Unfortunately, those where they were productive in the past helped get the job done. They're increasingly inhibiting getting the job done. Why? Because they inhibit creating the belief, creating the sense of responsibility among all those workers that it's they who bear responsibility for performance, they who should be involved in making decisions. We cannot preserve all of the symbols of class that set people apart, such as the tie and the large office in the corner, etc., that say here are people who make decisions versus here are people who do the work. We want to merge those people. It is that that will lead to higher performance tomorrow. My fifth principle I call the performance principle. Now, you've heard about employee involvement, and employee involvement's a very good thing. But some people have the mistaken idea that what employee involvement means is getting employees together and sitting them around in a circle and talking about problems. Now, that may be a good thing to do. It usually is a good thing to do. But we do not want workers involved just in thinking about problems. What we want employees involved in at every level in the organization is we want them involved in accepting responsibility for performance, not just for solving problems. What are, for yourself and the team of people reporting to you, think of your organization chart, instead of individuals reporting to each other, as triangles from yourself to the subordinates below you, and from yourself up to you're on the team of your boss. There are teams at every level. Those teams should ask themselves, what are the key performance variables for our team? How do we know when our team is doing a good job? Teams play well, whether on the basketball court or at work, when they know what their score is, when they're watching their score, when they're paying attention to their score. Put up a graph so your employees can see their score as a team. And they can say, hey guys, are we winning or are we losing? And get them together once a week to ask the question, how did we do last week? What can we do to improve next week? Why did performance go up last week, or why did it dip down last week? What can we do to improve performance? We want every employee in the organization to feel that teamwork, to feel that involvement in managing the real performance of the organization. That's what excites workers, not just being involved in solving problems, although that's a good thing to do also. My sixth principle is what I call the empiricism principle. Now, this is a funny word that you may not have heard before. What it really means is doing a good job of learning from our environment. And one way that we learn from our environment is through numbers. Now, there's a myth in American management that American managers are too numbers-oriented. I would submit to you that American managers are not too numbers-oriented. They are too confused by the many numbers that they have. It's not a quantity problem, it's a quality problem. The problem is, what do you do with all those numbers? How do you use them? Here is where the Japanese truly have achieved an advantage over us in the United States. And it's a problem that we're going to have to begin to solve back in elementary and grade school, but we can't wait for that solution. We've got to fix it now where we work. We've got to train people to use numbers well, to think in statistical concepts, rather than think about numbers as individual units. If you're a hunter, you know that when you have a target and you fire a gun at that target, every bullet, even if you hold the gun constantly steady, does not hit in the same place, does it? If a bullet hits 4 inches to the left, do you move the gun down to the right? No, you fire off 6 shots to see what the pattern of that performance is. And right there, in looking at that pattern, you can see all the concepts, the essential concepts of statistics. The concept of variability. Every system, and a handgun's a system, produces variability in performance, not the same performance each time. There is a distribution of that performance. There is a standard of deviation from the mean, and there is a mean. As a manager, you manage a system. You can judge the quality of performance of that system by looking at the statistics, looking at the numbers that represent that system's performance. But we're going to have to learn to look at those numbers statistically. You should all know about W. Edwards Deming, the father of Japanese statistical process control, whom is named the Deming Prize, the highest award for Japanese quality. If the Japanese have gained quality by following this American and his understanding of statistics, I think that all of us need to take a look at that and learn to look at numbers and make decisions in a better way using those numbers. Now, my seventh principle is what I call the intimacy principle. What does intimacy mean? Well, we feel intimate with people. You know, our family is an intimate group of people, isn't it? We feel intimate when there's a bond between people, when there's trust and when there's interdependence between people. If you think about the history of American business, I think you can see 3 phases of history. The first phase was back in Ben Franklin's print shop and the small family farm. It was a highly dependent, interdependent, intimate environment. The second phase was when we created the factory, the Industrial Revolution. Henry Ford's factory and Frederick Taylor's scientific management created a whole new system of managing. It was a system that led to higher levels of efficiency. The manager defined the work the one best way and worked to cause workers to conform to that one best way. He controlled them to that one best way. That is not the management of the future, because today the most important work occurs in the head. And what we want is workers who think and make decisions. And we can't say to somebody, Joe, I want 4 good new ideas, creative ideas from you, and I want them by Friday at 4 o'clock. They don't come that way. They may come on Saturday when I'm playing ball or sitting out in the field mowing my lawn or something. So we want to manage people in a way where they feel the interrelationship between manager and worker, worker and work, worker in the organization. We want to recreate that sense of interdependence, okay? We want to recreate that feeling of intimacy in the organization. The organization that achieves competitive organization will be like at Delta Airlines, they talk about the Delta family feeling. That's an expression of that feeling of shared relationship and shared dependence. My last principle is what I call the integrity principle. Now, one could hardly make a list of characteristics for an ideal culture and not include it within it the element of honesty or integrity. Truly, honesty is the foundation of all virtues. You remove that and all of the other virtues disappear quickly. As a leader, and we all want to see ourselves as a leader, we all want to be successful as a leader. As a leader, there's absolutely one thing you must have, and that is followers. If you want to be a leader, you've got to have followers. You may be carrying the banner, marching out across the desert, singing the song, but if there's nobody behind you, you're merely a fool. If suddenly there are 10,000 people behind you, you're a great leader. Where do we get followers from? Followership is an act of trust. How do we create that trust that is followership. We create trust by behaving in ways that are of high integrity, behaving in ways that are trustworthy. It is an imperative of leadership to create trust. And this is one of these areas where the perception is the reality. We cannot say that employees do not trust, but leaders are doing a good job. It's the job of leaders to create that trust. So if the trust is not there, the burden is on us to change our behavior to behave in ways that create that trust. These 8 principles of tomorrow's culture, I hope, will stimulate you to talk about, to think about ways that you can transform and change your own culture to create a more positive, high-performance environment. I think that when historians look back on the period of the 1980s, they will say that some revolution occurred. This was a major transition period, not only for the American corporation, not only for Southwestern Bell, but for all organizations throughout the world. I think that we're in a key transition point. I think one thing that historians will say about this phase of history is that a major change occurred that represented a split in the human character over thousands and thousands of years. You know, in ancient times, the holy man literally went into the desert to bury himself in the sand to demonstrate his detachment from the material. This was the eye of the needle. You couldn't be holy and attached to the material. The merchant trading in the bazaar, on the other hand, was assumed to be tainted. Still, within our culture, there's a strain that says somehow if you're in business, you must be a little tainted. Well, I think we're creating a new culture. And I think one of the ingredients of that new culture is that we are bringing together, we're merging those traditions, and we're creating a form, a process of management that not only will lead us to higher material well-being, but will also bring together those ingredients that lead to higher nobility, higher spiritual well-being. And I think all of us, whether we know it or not, are engaged and part of that process of transformation.